I need Chris Lindstrom and Kaylee McGarry to get it together.
This is Locked On Sports Atlanta, and it's time for the Atlanta Football Party, only on Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The Atlanta Football Party, your home for the best Atlanta Falcons football talk. It's local insight you can't get anywhere but right here at Locked On. I'm your host, Tenitra Batiste. Alongside me, our longtime Falcons analyst, Jarvis Davis, and Locked On Falcons host, Aaron Freeman. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. So visit FanDuel.com to get started. And our Atlanta Football Party is part of the Locked On Falcons, Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'll talk about Three's Company bouncing back, and can somebody corral dude on the screen kind of a little bit to your left, my right, because he's having a moment. But first, let's talk about a key to the game not named Kirk Cousins. So our girl, Tori McElhaney, who, of course, is in Vegas, and she's several hours behind us. So, of course, she'll join us again next week. But she wrote this cool article for the AtlantaFalcons.com website. Of course, she is the senior reporter for that website, and it was her Sunday six-pack. So I thought it might be cool, guys, to start there. Since week 10, the Falcons have the lowest percentage of 3-and-outs in the NFL. They average more plays per drive than any other team in the league, yet they rank 29th in points per drive and touchdown rate. But what's one thing other than a return to Kirktober, Aaron, that will absolutely mean that the Falcons can maybe take advantage of a Raiders team that's ranked 25th in the league in red zone defense and 30th in points allowed per game?
I think, if it's really about scoring in the red zone, which I think those stats that you rattled off, T, are really about, the key for the Falcons, they just got to find ways to score. And I think running the football more effectively, I think, will benefit this team. They've struggled in short yardage during this run, and that I think that's a contributing factor. You go back to that Saints game where they had the ball at the 1 yard line, and it took them 4 tries on 4 runs in order to convert on that situation. You saw some of the short yardage issues, especially in that Chargers game. And so I do think, and we've had a couple of times where the Falcons run the ball well in the red zone and they get a holding call that backs them up and things like that. So I think if this ground game can get going against this Raiders team, it does take a lot of pressure off of the need for Kirk Cousins to have to get back and rewind the clock in order to win. And so I think that's kind of the thing that I'm looking for. Can this run game assert itself, especially once they get closer to the end zone?
Yeah, and that's the thing as well, Jarvis. Like you get excited because you see this team put together good drives. You see this team have good success with time of possession, meaning, hey, they keep their defense off the field and keep them fresh. But unfortunately, it doesn't seem to pay true dividends, right? We're looking at, oh man, disappointment because it's a field goal. And let's just be honest, we're at a point in place too. And we haven't really talked about that a lot. So maybe we can talk about that at some point today. But we're at a point in place where special teams, particularly Younghoe Koo, can't be completely trusted as we did in years before in those situations where it's like, okay, all we can get is 3. But I think with those two things in mind, and again, trying to look away from Kirk Cousins' performance as being the sole answer, what do you think is one of the keys to this Falcons team taking advantage of a sorry Raiders red zone defense to be able to score?
I love how you put that. Just sorry. Just sorry. They ain't good. But yeah, I think the word for me is discipline, right? Because I think a lot of times, like when the Falcons find themselves getting on drives and getting into good drives and having some momentum, and they get into those 6, 7, 8, 10 play drives, they have a brain fart, whether it be a hold or a false start, or it's just something always weird happens in it. Those drives tend to stall out, and then you have to depend on a guy like Younghoe Koo, who hasn't had one of his best years this year. So I think disciplinary standpoint, making sure they don't shoot themselves in the foot, don't have one of those moments when you get down there. So, and I think also to kind of add to what Aaron was saying as far as run game, which is a great point. Not only having success when you have to have success when those runs are called, but they have to be called. And hey, can they be called under center as well? Because if you give that particular defense, which is not a good one, like you mentioned, I think that when you give them that look where you're under center running the ball, then that's gonna open. They're gonna be susceptible to that play action as well in that same look. So I think being able to set yourself up to be able to have success, right? You start by being disciplined. Don't shoot yourself in the foot.
Yeah.
Hey, coach, let's get Kirk up under center where he's had some success, and let's put him in position to be able to succeed too when you are having success running the football, but through play action. And then that's going to be able to you're going to be able to have that two-way go, and not people have their be peeling back so much to kind of try to stop once they see you once you give off a certain look like we saw early on in the year.
Yeah. And I think too, not that we're going to have a whole conversation about Kirk, because I think we've kind of talked about him ad nauseum, but Jarvis, you do make a good point that Aaron, I wanted to give you an opportunity to weigh in on, because comfortability for Kirk Cousins is just as important. Putting him in a position where he's comfortable, like you said, play action, utilizing something that not only has he had success with this season, but in his entire career, and kind of not always putting him in some formation like a shotgun. And it's like, well, that ain't working. So, yeah, I think, Free, to piggyback on what Jarvis said, I think it goes through the run game, but I also think, come on, Zach Robinson, you got to give Kirk Cousins some comfortability in wherever you put him in situations where he's going to pass.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, T. It's something that I've talked about on Locked On Falcons, where it's not to sit here and blame the Kirk Cousins struggles in recent weeks on Zach Robinson, because Kirk is making those mistakes. We know that those are Kirk pressing, Kirk forcing throws that he shouldn't be doing at that point in time. But when you get all the bad and none of the good of Kirk Cousins, that's where I do think you can maybe point more fingers at Zach Robinson. And the lack of good, I think, is owed to what you're talking about, where you're not really playing an offense that Kirk Cousins has excelled in throughout his career. He's been primarily an under center, play action, attack the middle of the field quarterback, and the Falcons are running a lot of shotgun, a lot of pistol, not basically at the bottom of the league in play action. And when they do run play action, they're not consistently attacking the middle of the field. They're attacking outside the numbers. And so I think those are some of the factors why, like, it would be different if you were getting Kirk playing poorly, but you are also getting the good version of Kirk Cousins that we saw earlier this season. It would balance out a little bit more, and there would be, still criticism because he's quarterback, but it would be less criticism at this point. But you're not getting any of that good with Kirk Cousins. And I do think Zach Robinson does need to do a little bit better job of doing some of the things that you saw Kirk be very successful at over these last couple of years in Minnesota in a very similar offense, but that was really geared, I think, to Kirk's strengths. And so you got the best or the better version of Kirk Cousins in those years under Kevin O'Connell. So I hope the Falcons can implement some of that stuff, and I think that will also benefit this team in this Raiders matchup as well as down the stretch.
Okay, so JD, Free actually said one more thing that I just want to give you an opportunity to weigh in on before we move on. That's the other criticism that's been there, like, hey, can we use the middle of the field a little bit better? And there are opportunities there that all of us have seen, and it's like, well, why aren't you using it? It's like free space, for your receivers to just run, just kind of go, and it's not being utilized. So what do you think? Is that something as well, especially based on what we're seeing out of this Raiders defense? Is that something as well that maybe Zach Robinson can better exploit tonight?
It's all about the relationship. I've talked about this, pretty much ad nauseum with the relationship between Kyle Pitts and Kirk Cousins. I don't think the trust is there just from a quarterback to receiver standpoint, because, not to say that their relationship is contentious, but, just by what I've seen, on film, as far as Kyle Pitts winning and Kirk not really looking his way, and I think that, just by in the totality of this particular season, I can understand why he doesn't necessarily look his way, because of, the inconsistencies, as far as running your routes and being where you're supposed to be and all that good stuff. So I think that if once you get down there in that particular spot, I feel like if you have, like you said, you have to be able to have success running the football. If you're able to have success running the football, I believe that you can take advantage of it, because that tends to give you a little bit more room. And we know how tight those windows are down in the red zone. So if they are hard going fast on against the run, and then you stick that ball in the stomach of Bijan and you pull that bad boy back out, more than likely it's going to be hard to mess up being open. So I feel like for those reasons, if they're able to have success running the football down there in the red zone, I feel like they can take advantage of that tonight.
And Aaron, this is a tough go for the Raiders, but hey, it might be an opportunity for the Falcons to exploit as well. Max Crosby announced over the weekend that he'll have ankle surgery, so it's probably a wrap for him for the season. So with Cross and his 7.5 sacks being a non-factor for the Falcons tonight, what do you see as maybe the best way they can take advantage of his absence?
Jarvis and I talked about this on the recent Locked On Falcons, with the expectation that Max Crosby was going to play the game, just run at him, but the problem with running at Max Crosby is like he also leads the NFL in tackles for loss. So he's going to backdoor blocks and shoot gaps and whatnot. And so it's just like, okay, well, now that he's not going to do those things, we'll just continue this game plan and we should find success, right? Because he's going to, not only be an impactful pass rusher, but also be able to get those negative yards when the Falcons do want to run the ball on some of the early downs, as they've done so often these last couple of weeks. And so to me, like, your game plan doesn't necessarily change. It just means like, okay, we can actually get Kyle Pitts more involved in the offense because he doesn't have to stay in as much to chip. But I do want to make note that the one game that Max Crosby missed this year, Tyree Wilson had his best game that week and was filling in for Max Crosby as that main left defensive end. They also had Christian Wilkins in that game against the Browns earlier this season. He's not in the lineup anymore due to an injury as well. So hopefully Tyree Wilson doesn't sort of start living up to his top 10 billing against the Falcons, as we know players often like to do, where they like, hey, we get to play the Falcons this week. Let me play my best football game that I've played in like 8 weeks.
Right.
So hopefully that doesn't happen. But I do think the Falcons game plan can remain the same. And it's just like now, because you're not going to necessarily have the disruptive presence of Max Crosby on the field, not only as a pass rusher and a run defender, you should be able to find a lot more success running the football, especially to that right side, because we saw in week 1, the Falcons game plan against TJ Watt was we'll just run away from him and leave him unblocked. And you saw that didn't stop TJ Watt from taking over the game. And so I hope that the Falcons weren't going to do the same thing with Max Crosby. But now I think hopefully, if that whoever replaces Max Crosby is unblocked, that player won't take over the game like we've seen other guys do.
And to your point, Aaron, I feel like this is one of those games where we'll be talking about the right side, if they are able to get a win. Like, man, Chris Lindstrom and doggone Caleb McGarry, man, they really got after it. They really start putting their hands on guys. Charlie Warner's out there seeking and destroying. He didn't have to worry about picking up that defensive tackle that may have kind of slipped off of Chris or Caleb when they try to get to the next level. He's just working his way up to that second level, working their way to the linebacker, and maybe even that safety. And Bijan takes one, for 60, 70 yards to the house, because we really haven't seen that, right? That's what I'm waiting for, and we know how in those moments with runs like that, everybody has to be on the same page. Everybody has to be doing their job. And I think that this is one of those games where we could see potentially one of those breakout runs where he takes that bad boy to the house. And I think that, with the Chris Lindstrom and Caleb McGarry having the game like we haven't quite seen in a while sometime, I feel like this is one of those games where we can see that, and it will be solely because of those guys doing what we expect them to do, specifically in the run game.
So it looks like Jarvis is looking for McGarry and Lindstrom to bounce back on the offensive side of the ball. We'll talk about someone who maybe needs to bounce back on the defensive side, or maybe another position group, when we take it under further review. This episode of our Atlanta Football Party is brought to you by BetterHelp. How do you stay cozy during the winter months? For some, wrapping up in a blanket with a mug of hot chocolate or watching a movie with family is the best way to spend the month of December. Therapy is also a great way to bring yourself some comfort that never goes awry, even when the season changes. So if you're thinking of starting therapy and ending 2024 on a high note, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. So find comfort this December with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/locked-on today to get 10% off your first month. So think about it. We've got about 2 weeks maybe left in 2024, and you want to end it on a high note. BetterHelp would be the way to go. So again, visit BetterHelp.com/locked-on today to get 10% off your first month and find comfort this December with BetterHelp. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/locked-on. This episode of our Atlanta Football Party is also brought to you by the College Football Playoffs. It's that time of the year. The College Football Playoff is back. And with the newly expanded 12-team format, it's guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever, bringing you all the hard-hitting and high-flying excitement you love. TNT Sports coverage of the College Football Playoff begins December 21st, starting with the College Football Playoff Kickoff Show, presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern, leading into our first matchup, the Southern Methodist University Mustangs battling the Penn State Nittany Lions at noon. Then the Clemson Tigers look to upset the Texas Longhorns in a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern. So don't miss a moment of the action. Watch the College Football Playoff presented by Allstate live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. So, Jarvis, we actually alluded to this Thursday. I think we had a little fun with it because Aaron almost sent us down the rabbit hole talking about the only weapon that anyone considers the Raiders actually have, and especially with Max Crosby done for the season, like we just talked about. That weapon, of course, is Brock Bowers, probably looking at Jesse Bates III getting that assignment. So what does a bounce back Bates game against Bowers look like for you after, we'll call it a little bit of an atypical performance for Bates last week?
To be honest with you, I think Jerry Gray made a great point when he started talking about how Bates has to stop worrying about trying to help others and do his job first.
Yeah.
And I thought he explained it in a Jerry Gray way. He was just like, hey, man, you only get one check, bro. You know what I'm saying? It's like, you got to be able to trust your teammates to do their job. And then so you can be that high level guy at doing your job. So the more you try to supplement for others, the less you're going to be able to do what you need to do. And I think that is spot on, spoken from a wise man who is a very wise man. We all know how Jerry Gray is and appreciate him, what he brings to the table with his Falcons secondary. So, yeah, I think that given the type of offense that you're facing, given what they only have like one real guy, and he's really good, Brock Bowers, to worry about on offense. I think you can't let that be the person that beat you. And I think you kind of subsidize that by, throwing different looks at him. And Aaron, I talked about this on Locked on Falcons as well. Like, I think not Jerry Gray, but oh gosh.
Jimmy Lake,
yes.
That other guy?
Right. The other guy that calls defensive plays for the Atlanta Falcons. I think Jimmy Lake needs to throw different looks at him. Have a Troy, Caden Ellis on him, or or throw a Justin Simmons at him, or throw a Jesse Bates at him. When you're trying to heat up the quarterback in particular situations. So I think that you have the weapons to deploy. Or even a D offer. Because he's going to line up in the slot quite a bit as well. So I think the matchups need to be coming, like throwing different guys at them and trying to work through. And while you're doing that, you're trying to heat up the quarterback to force him to make a mistake, so you can get some turnovers and get that offense some extra possession.
Yeah, and for you, that is interesting that Jerry Gray would mention that, but because I do think a guy like Jesse Bates' knee-jerk reaction is going to be, we need to send help because I see how leaky the rest of the secondary is. But Jerry Gray makes a valid point as well. You need Jesse Bates III to be Jesse Bates III. And if he does his job at the high level that we're accustomed to, then whatever everybody else does, especially because we're really talking about one weapon that the Raiders have this week. This may be the opportunity for him to just get back to focusing on what he does, and everybody else, you could just do your job the way you're supposed to.
Yes, I do want to acknowledge Jacoby Myers just because my fantasy team is facing Jacoby Myers tonight, and I do not need him to go off. So I want to acknowledge him before we go, play it tonight, so that people will be like, "Oh, Jacoby Myers went off for 3 touchdowns." I'm like, "Yeah, man, I don't need that."
Right.
So, yeah, I getting back on point though, T. Like, I agree with you. Like, I think with Jesse Bates, a lot of the issues last week was him trying to cover for other people's mistakes, and just as Jarvis said, like, there's only one check. As good as Jesse Bates is, I almost called him Michael Jordan. As good as he is, he can't necessarily make up for other people messing up in the secondary. And so, for me, when I look at this game, piggybacking on Jarvis's point about throwing different looks at him, and we talked about this on Locked On Falcons, where it's kind of similar to back in the day when the Falcons had to deal with a player like Jimmy Graham, and they didn't have a single player that they could just put on Jimmy Graham and say, "Go shut that guy down." And they threw William Moore, Thomas Deku, Stephen Nicholas, all types of different players at him. But for me, the player that I think probably could potentially do the most in terms of keeping Brock Bowers contained is potentially Justin Simmons, who's playing next to Jesse Bates, who I feel like did not look great last week in that Vikings game, and really hasn't looked great since like the Sunday night game against the Chiefs where he picked off that pass. And we're like, oh yeah, this is why we signed Justin Simmons. And since then, it's been kind of like,
why did we sign Justin?
Yeah. It's like, well, what is it that you do, Justin Simmons? And again, I don't think that's all on Justin Simmons. We've seen him play at a high level, and that goes to the guy that Jarvis forgot, Jimmy Lake, and whether or not this scheme is maximizing players and all that stuff. But
I hope that's not an omen. Can I say that, Aaron? I hope that's not an omen, because I've already had one omen already.
Yeah, we will discuss. We didn't forget about that.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah, Jarvis. We're going to come back to that. But
yes.
I think Justin Simmons, he's the guy that when you look back, he's probably the guy that could do the most to help this team out if he has a bounce back game to keep Brock Bowers contained. So he's one of those guys that I'm looking at tonight that I think is going to be a big part of what Jarvis is talking about. We're throwing different looks at him, and if he can take advantage of the looks when he gets that opportunity, I think that would be huge for the Falcons defense.
So Pro Bowl voting has officially begun, and the Falcons actually have player options at every position, at least on defense, except for DN. But that said, who's that one player for you, Jarvis, whom you'd like to see on defense maybe have a Pro Bowl type performance tonight? And notice I said like to, not necessarily need to, but maybe you'd like to be able to say post-game, hey, I was hoping that guy would have a Pro Bowl type performance.
You know what? This is a guy that I've been kind of had my eye on, throughout the season, and I was kind of, that I really like, when the Falcons brought him in, and that is David Onyemata. I feel like he is due one of those games. Like, man, just come on, give me something. Give me one of those games where you're like, oh, I understand why y'all brought him in along with Caden Ellis, because Caden Ellis has been playing lights out. Yeah. I fully expect him to continue to go that route as long as Jimmy Lake, continues with the adjustments. Like, they keep applying those every week as the season winds down, sir. Appreciate you. But I think David Onyemata is the guy that I would like to see have a Pro Bowl type performance, because we know that he has those abilities. I mean, granted, they don't show up as much as they used to, because, hey, the guy's a little bit longer in the tooth. So, and we understand that. That's just how the NFL works when it comes to being consistent performing on a weekly basis. So that's my guy that I would go with. Like, I really would like to see, because when he's humming and Grady is humming, that run defense looks a little different.
And Free, for you, who's that guy that you'd like to see have a Pro Bowl type performance tonight?
Well, I just mentioned Justin Simmons. He's one. But because I have to deal with Jacoby Myers in fantasy football tonight in the playoffs, I want AJ Terrell to have a Pro Bowl performance. I want him to shut that guy down and get like 2 picks tonight. And basically, anytime Desmond Ridder or whoever's the quarterback for the Raiders is throws at somebody other than Brock Bowers, I want AJ Terrell to come down with that football and it not to be land in the hands of Jacoby Myers. So I would appreciate AJ locking down your side of the field when Jacoby Myers is out there, shutting him down, getting a couple of picks. That's going to be pivotal to this Falcons defense, getting some of those turnovers that we're talking about, giving that offense a lot more opportunities. And, it might help a brother out in his fantasy playoff situation. So that's who I'm rooting for.
Yeah, if you get a little bit of positive for Aaron Freeman personally, no harm, no foul. But yeah, AJ Terrell, definitely you need to be able to help these Falcons get a turnover that offense can hopefully capitalize on. Now, we told you guys that we were not going to let this go because we're not. So for the sake of Falcons fandom, Jarvis Davis has to be stopped, period. This episode of our Atlanta Football Party is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. And if you visit FanDuel.com, you'll see that they have 3 best NFL bets and predictions for Falcons at Raiders for tonight. And they've got the Raiders at a +5.5. They also have a total match of points of 44.5. So that'll be interesting. And then they have the Las Vegas Raiders total points or the Atlanta Falcons total points at 19.5. So maybe you get a hunch in the middle of this game on how you want to approach that game. You can get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet if you go to FanDuel.com and join today. Now, never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL and, of course, America's #1 sportsbook. Locked On Sports Atlanta is a free 24/7 sports streaming channel and is programmed to bring you all Atlanta sports on one channel. Locked On Sports Atlanta also brings you the best coverage for the Falcons, Hawks, Braves, and Bulldogs, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So let's rewind it back to Thursday's episode of our football party, where one Jarvis Davis said, and I quote, "As long as Jimmy Lake," the guy he just forgot about, as long as Jimmy Lake doesn't go back to what he did pre-bye week from a defensive scheme, mindset standpoint, there's no way possible that they can Falcon. Aaron's response was, and I quote with all the drama, "Why are you doing this? Why are you doing this?" So it's time for us to take a little bit of a rewind back and kind of let Jarvis have it because, hey, that kind of commentary put out in the atmosphere, you know what it does, Aaron. You know what it does. It means an L if you're not careful. So what kind of mojo, what kind of juju do we need to put out there so that Jarvis's words actually don't mean disaster for these Falcons in Sin City?
Well, I'm curious what Jarvis is willing to do in order to.
You know what? Yes, exactly. Put it back on him, Aaron. That's right. Yeah.
It's really up to Jarvis.
What is going on?
Yeah.
You're going to play
Aaron Freeman, Esquire.
What mojo are you going to put out in the world, my friend, to counteract the nefarious evil deeds that you did on Thursday?
Evil, just evil. And I thought he was a Falcons fan. I thought he was a lifer. And then he puts out there that they're not going to Falcon. Do you know you got to do the reverse juju? You got to do Jedi mind tricks up in here.
It's already been reversed. See,
now.
I don't want to get all spiritual and religious, you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. But when you are expecting,
you take it to the altar.
Yes, you know what I'm saying? When you are expecting a certain thing and it doesn't necessarily come when you want it, that's kind of how I was. I was just like, all right, there's no way they can Falcon. There's no way they can Falcon just based off of who they're going up against. 9-game losing streak, all that stuff. Desmond Ridder coming back, you know what I'm saying? Potentially being the starting quarterback. Yeah, we understand what Desmond Ridder is. That's why he's not here anymore. So, but that wasn't enough. That's not enough to keep people, the Falcons from falconing and to reverse that juju that you talk about, T. You know when the juju got reversed? We talked about it earlier. Max Crosby says, I'm getting surgery and I'm done for the season. What player announces that he's done for the season? He's getting surgery. You know, we've never really seen stuff like that. You know, I mean, we may have seen it a couple times, but most of the time you hear from the team, it's announcement. That man said, I don't want the Falcons to Falcon, so I'm taking myself out this game, and I'm going to be done for the year. Oh, yeah, I might request a trade to come to y'all, too, in the offseason.
Ooh.
So, you know, feel me on this one.
I don't like that. Yeah.
I don't want the Falcons to Falcon. I want them to get into the playoffs because, you know what I'm saying, they got some good things going on down there. I might even mess with Raheem Morris a little bit. So I might be able to work some things out, you know what I'm saying, be able to get down there, you know, come to an organization with a potential to be a winning organization. You know what I'm saying? We ain't gonna go too far, you know what I'm saying? But yeah, I feel like in my heart of hearts, T, that expectation that I had has been answered. When Max Crosby took himself out of this seat, the 2024 season, and said, you know what? I can't take this ish no more, and I don't want to see the Falcons Falcon. So there you go. It's reversed.
Aaron, does that work for you?
Done.
I don't. It feels like he just doubled down on what he said Thursday by basically saying, "Well, now that Max Crosby's not going to play, it's not possible that the Falcons can." I don't know. I don't know. Just feels like
Max Crosby chose to carry the weight, like he's been carrying his Raiders defense. No, you know, it's only so much you can do, but you know what I'm saying, he still looks like the player that we expect him to be disruptive, tackles for loss. Got 7 sacks on the year. You know what I'm saying? Like all of those things, you know, added up to him saying, you know what? I heard Jarvis. I listened to Atlanta Football Party on Locked On Sports Atlanta. You know, it's free and available wherever you download your podcast.
That it is.
I get it. You know, I listen to Locked On Falcons too. I like that Aaron dude, Aaron Freeman Esquire. I think he's a lawyer. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, those are the things that he understood and took in and said, I need to do something. I need to help my brother out down there in Atlanta. You know what I'm saying? The guy who defied his father's wishes, you know, and became an Atlanta professional sports team fan at a young age. You know what I mean? So, yeah, this is where we are. This is where we are. I feel like Max Crosby took it upon himself to say, you know what? I ain't taking this. I'm putting my foot down. I will not be the reason why the Falcons Falcon on Monday night, you know, in front of everybody.
And then Aaron, to take it further, the foreboding of having Max Crosby come here next season, you know, I kind of like put that in, just kind of threw that in for some more positive juju. But let's go around the NFC South Sunday action because only one team had some good juju yesterday. The Panthers, of course, a non-factor at this point, but they actually almost beat the Cowboys. They kind of hung with them until, of course, they did in 30-14 the final yesterday. The Commanders outlasted the Saints with a 20-19 win. But, of course, the one that all eyes were on for all intents and purposes was what in the world were the Bucs going to do? Because at the end of the day, that's really who the Falcons are chasing if the Falcons intend to walk away with a division title. That said, the Buccaneers did not cooperate. The Chargers did not do the Falcons any favors to the tune of a 40-17 beatdown by the Bucs of the Chargers in LA, no doubt. So here we are once again. And do you feel like, now that, of course, I'm not trying to put negative juju out there, Jarvis, but I am saying, Free, it just feels like, okay, not that there wasn't already pressure on the Falcons to win this game for obvious reasons of a 4-game losing streak. But on the same token, when you're kind of looking over your shoulder and you're seeing 40-17, it kind of makes you feel like, okay, like we legit have to do something tonight to be able to keep up with these guys if we want to absolutely walk away with the South at the end of the season.
Well, yeah, I don't want to put too much bad juju out there, but the Bucs beating the Chargers in the way that they beat the Chargers pretty much tells you, yeah, the division is wrapped up. It's gone. The Falcons' best shot really is second place. They barring a miracle, you know, maybe a Cooper Rush miracle, you know, they're not going to catch the Bucs. So it's really about the 7 seed at this point in time. It's just you got to run the table. Hope Washington loses next week against Philly. I think Seattle loses against Minnesota next week, and then the Falcons can beat Washington the following week, and hopefully you get a 10-7, 2 teams at 10-7 with the Falcons winning the tiebreaker to get the 7 seed, and I think maybe play Philadelphia again in Philadelphia. And it's like, okay, there's a shot. Like they could sweep the Eagles this year. Maybe there's a shot. They already beat the Eagles in the playoffs. Like maybe they can do some damage in the playoffs. Again, that's the only hope I have at this point right now. So like, yeah, the division probably is locked up unless Tampa Bay really, really craps the bed these last couple of weeks. And these last couple of years, that is not something that they have done under Todd Bowles. So I'm not going to hold my breath that the Falcons are going to be able to catch up with the Bucs in the NFC South. So I'm circling that 7 seed at this point in time, and just hope that the Falcons just, put it together and go 4-0 to finish this year.
Yeah, that might be a tough road, Jarvis, because the Bucs do have the Cowboys winnable game, Carolina definitely winnable game, Saints I think a winnable game as well. So yeah, it might be a little bit of a challenge, especially because I know in my opinion, I thought the Chargers of those 4 teams probably had the best opportunity to give the Bucs an L, maybe the Cowboys if it's, a good night for them, especially with what we saw in their run game yesterday versus maybe what we've seen. But I don't know, Spree, maybe you're being nice because right now the NFL playoff picture on NFL.com has the Falcons squarely in the 10th spot. But again, they win tonight, and that totally changes the trajectory of what can happen for these Falcons. But for you, Jarvis, what did you feel like after you saw that 40-17 smoking of the Chargers by the Bucs Sunday?
I even tweeted out during the game. I was like, the Falcons are in trouble, Jack, because the Bucs are rolling, and even with the mistakes that Baker Mayfield made, they still were able to overcome that stuff. So that's why I think Aaron makes a great point. Like Todd Bowles don't get any credit for being a solid head coach. It just seems like people like, oh yeah, forget about Tampa, or they haven't found their coach to get them to the Super Bowl, or they haven't found their quarterback to get them to the Super Bowl. But they just continue to go out and win this doggone division and be in right there in the conversation at the end of the year to be able to get a home playoff game. So I think, yeah, the Falcons are in trouble. So that's why I say this game is vital to their playoff capabilities of playing postseason football, which was the goal coming into this year. However you get there, this goal was to be able to play a postseason football game. We hadn't been there since 2017. So this was the goal. This was why you brought in Kirk. This was why you got the elite processor, to be able to come in here and do what you need to do to get into the postseason. So yeah, I think that was one. And then when from Aaron's standpoint, talking about that 7 seed, man, if the Saints would have, I felt like the Saints probably lost that game on purpose. Like, you know what? If we win this game, I don't think Spencer Rattler understood the assignment. Jake Hayner, he understood. Yeah. But once they put doggone Spencer Rattler, he's like, man, I'm trying to win. I need a job. Like, I don't know what y'all gonna do in the draft. I don't know who the head coach gonna be. I'm trying to win. And I think that for him to get them to as close as they did, they could have tied the game up there at the end, but they decided to go for 2, try to get the win. And I was like, if the Saints would have been able to beat the Commanders, I was like, oh, that 7 seed might be a real thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that based on how things went down yesterday, on Sunday, I feel like the Falcons, like, it shouldn't take that to happen in order for them to have that mindset. Like, this is a must-win game. We talked about it. It's even more of a must-win game now, given what's left for the Bucs and given what's in front of the Falcons right now, as far as trying to figure out a way to get this divisional win or trying to get that 7 seed as a wild card.
Yeah. Thanks to our everydayers for making the Atlanta Football Party your first listen of the day. Be sure to stop by Locked On Falcons with your host, Aaron Freeman, as your second listen. And of course, JD, Free, and I will see you tonight for post-game breakdown of Falcons Raiders.